Welcome to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
At EPLA, we seek to support women and families suffering early pregnancy loss by providing resources, education, and community. It is our vision that no one suffers miscarriage alone.
Welcome back to Hope Blooms. I am Maria Servold, EPLA's president.
And I'm Emily Carrington, EPLA's executive director. And today we're going to talk a little bit about preparing for Christmas. And I think we're going to take this sort of from two directions. One, preparing for Christmas if you are fresh off of a loss, if you've experienced the loss anytime in the last year, if this is your first Christmas. I want to talk about
why that's hard.
Why that's hard and things that might sneak up on you and any way we can help you prepare. And then I also want to talk about preparing for Christmas if your loss was 2 or more or 10 or 20 years ago. Because I do think there's things you can do to prepare your heart for the holiday season, even if you're far out.
Right.
So if this is your first year after a loss, I'm so sorry you're with us today. You've had a hard year. And for me, I had 2 losses before there was a Christmas, and that was probably the hardest thing that had ever happened to me.
And you maybe didn't think how hard Christmas would be until it happened.
Right. And I had not ever really had a sad Christmas. I had lost grandparents, but I was young, or I was, older. And it was sad, but it was a long time coming. And I don't want to belittle, but it wasn't the same intensity of personal grief. Those were really, really hard Christmases on my mom. But this was the first time that I was carrying the grief inside of me so deeply and so heavily. And I had never really contemplated what a sad Christmas would be like.
Right. Because you don't. Everyone expects it to be, it's the happiest time of the year.
Right. And it was I guess I lived a charmed life in that way. But also miscarriage is a really big thing. And so, when I got pregnant in the spring of 14, I had visioned that Christmas. I wasn't going to go to Thanksgiving. I like to plan. I wasn't going to go to Thanksgiving because I was going to have a baby that week or 11 days earlier. But Christmas would be this is what Christmas. And I was already everyone's going to need to come to us because we're going to have a tiny baby. And I was planning and visioning, and it all came crashing down. And I had to work through some of that for myself, about this light in the darkness.
Right.
And understanding Christmas is the solstice holiday, right? It's the darkest week of the year. But it had always just been the happiest week of the year. So,
but then when that vision you had was no longer going to be reality. Right. And coming to terms with that.
Right.
And then it rolling around and you sort of having to deal with the day-to-day of that.
Right. Exactly.
Not being fulfilled. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I don't know if there's anything I wish I would have done differently, but definitely there were some things that surprised me. Some grief snuck up on me. And I think I don't know that there's any way you can keep grief from sneaking up on you.
Yeah.
Other than knowing grief might sneak up on you. And so.
Right. And in weird moments there's not a present under the tree for this baby, or, the stocking is not hung up, which you maybe didn't think of in the summertime or whatever.
Right. And everything just felt so big and so intense. And I could not put it in its place. It just took over, and it would take over.
Everything is sort of covered with that cloud.
Right. And so when they're buying gifts for my nephew, who totally deserves gifts because he's a cute little baby, I'm where are my baby's gifts?
Yeah.
Well,
right.
Everyone misses your baby too, so I do think we had then later received some gifts from family honoring and remembering our babies. And I think it's okay to make some space for your babies, however you want. Is it a tiny stocking? Is it an ornament? Do you need to make some space and time for yourself for, reflection, meditation, or prayer before you go down to deal with the intensity and holly jolliness?
Yeah.
Do you need to walk away for a minute? How is it that you process feelings and emotions? It isn't always easy.
Well, and that's what I think is so important to recognize too, is like, say your loss happened in, March or something. So then like months go by, you're like, I'm feeling pretty good about I'm feeling better. I'm not actively every single day weeping or whatever, but then something could happen, right? At the holiday season time and reopen that wound. And that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with you if that happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. It may feel far away and it could be one of those surprising triggers. Your loss was, later in the year.
It was like end of September. So so that Christmas, it sort of felt like, I think even more so, I was sad that I wasn't pregnant at Christmas than like the following year that I didn't have a baby, if that makes sense. Because I sort of anticipated this like fun, or like we'd tell people at Christmas, that would have been like, 3 months or something. So it would have been like this great fun family bonding thing to, be pregnant at Christmas. And then I wasn't.
Right.
So yeah, I think the following Christmas was when we did get pregnant with my now 9-year-old. So that felt sort of redeemed. Yeah, that first one, I missed, my grief was over not having a cute little bump at Christmas time.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. A really good point is that you had this picture of what Christmas would be whenever, my first pregnancy, we found out in March. So we were due around Thanksgiving. So the holidays immediately became part of my vision for this baby. And we were moving back closer to family. We were still 3.5 hours away, but we were no longer 21 hours away. So there was this like, we can make everyone come to us because we're not that far.
Yeah.
And so I think wherever you were, whatever you pictured that to be, is a hard realization.
Yes.
And to expect to feel like, there was some even like loneliness, missing my child, but also feeling I was the only one feeling these feelings.
Yes. Well, and that's one of the hardest parts, I think, about the grief that sneaks up on you, especially at a time that might feel inconvenient or something. It's like, then you sort of feel like, oh no, now I'm causing a problem. Now I'm the weird one who wants to sit in her room all day. It's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I don't know, people are more and more understanding of that sort of a problem, and just, tell people you need space, tell them you need time if you want to, it's okay.
Yeah.
So what sort of things, did you do anything special to remember your losses, as like with Christmas ornaments or anything?
Yeah, we have Christmas ornaments for each of our losses. And I look forward to getting them out every year. And it sort of helps. And it's just such a good way. I mean, we've had 3 losses. It just feels like such a good way. Like 3 tiny stockings is probably like more visualized grief than I want to handle.
Right.
But the 3 little ornaments just feel like they're with us. And a good chance to talk to the girls about the babies. And a good reminder for me to slow down and to remember some of that first Christmas. And and I think one thing that first Christmas that was probably good for me is that I went through the ritual even if I was really confused. By that, because at that point, I mean, we were out of the emergency trauma danger, right? Like that happened months ago. So, because now when I pull out those ornaments, I think about like sitting in the Christmas Eve service. I think about familiar places. I went back home and I did what I always did. And I have a healthy relationship with my family and my childhood. And so for me, that was comfort.
Yeah.
And
something to rely on.
And now,
well, that's sort of, it's like you're absorbing that grief into, like, now by hanging up those ornaments every year, it's become part of that yearly ritual in a way that's not upsetting,
but
just beautiful
and comforting and beautiful, and sort of pulls me back to some moments of healing, because there was also some healing that happened for me around Christmas time. It was still challenging with family, but there was some spiritual healing that happened. We've said before, EPLA is not necessarily a Christian organization, but many are all, we're a lot of Christians who are doing this. And so as I'm dwelling on this infant Christ, faced with my own loss of babies, and dwelling on Mary and all of these other Christmas stories, it allowed for some spiritual healing, because I know the end of the story.
Right.
And realizing that God the Father, knew child death too, it wasn't a perfect 1-to-1, but there was some spiritual healing that happened for me around Christmas time, that I think is important and was really important for my grief process. And so that's where I say, like, going through your normal, I needed to heal and
bring the two together
and reunite, and like sort of see the hope in the darkness, and I think all of life, right, there are these like moments of joy and moments of suffering, and they like butt up against each other. And I think I had to deal with that for the first time in a real sort of way.
Well, and I think it helps you realize you can't necessarily separate the two, right? Like it's gonna have to be a part of this from now on, and so let's find a way to make that okay, as opposed to sort of like trying to segment them in your brain, because then that's going to be too hard.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We have to figure out a way. So if Christmas is something that is important in your life, and I had really happy memories. This was something I was excited for my children. I had really happy memories of Santa and magic, all of and delivering gifts, and I had all of these warm, fuzzy memories. And those were all ultimately really good. And I had to reunite them in my head and figure them out. And as an adult, and, I was 27, and I'd been married for 5 years. I wasn't still a child, but there was definitely this coming into adulthood and understanding suffering and hope together. So which I think sort of leads us into the second half of this is, if you're a few years out and you have or haven't reconciled those things, the holiday season can be a difficult time. It can be a difficult time for anybody. And how do you place places? And I don't think it's too late to buy an ornament.
Right. Yeah, I was sort of thinking about that because I don't think I have one. Dang it, I should have one.
Well, you could buy one now.
I can buy one now.
Yeah, and there's some places that sell ornaments, and I don't think it's too late to do something small. If this is something that's important to your family, if you don't feel like you've done enough and it's still coming out as anger or frustration, or you feel like you've suppressed it, then do something.
Right.
If you have, what am I going to do to prepare? I'm going to do what I always do, or to the best of my ability. I'm going to get out my stuff. I'm going to find my ornaments. I'm going to think on things. And then that's going to help us prepare. So I think, and there's other, some churches and some towns will do Blue Christmas.
Yes, I was going to mention that. Yep.
It's appropriate to go.
Yes.
It's appropriate to go for a miscarriage. It's appropriate to be a part of that. If you need to embrace that sort of sad understanding of Christmas.
Right.
What else we have in terms of preparing?
I think the most important thing is just knowing that you might be surprised by grief. That's really, I think, the thing that I want people to think about.
Right.
Because it's like, yeah, it's a different environment. And so your feelings may be different.
Right. And your senses are overwhelmed.
Exactly.
Right? Like the sensory experience, I didn't really think about being until I had children. I never really thought about being overstimulated. Now I realize, like, one, I'm overstimulated all the time, but I think about their stimulation.
Yeah.
And like, oh my goodness, is Christmas super overstimulating?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not like bright and light. And I don't even mean like the tacky Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, of course that's overstimulating, but I just mean like there's so much going on in your nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
so much input, right? Like so much food, so much smells, so much decoration, so much expectation,
Mm-hmm.
so many plans. And I think part of preparing, I will say, if you are a fresh mom, if you just had a miscarriage, I think part of preparing is taking some time with you and yourself and figuring out what you can and cannot do this year.
Yes.
So if you've had a miscarriage and you have 4 other children, figure out if it's important to you. Like, I find like, okay, I need to make it magic for the ones that are here. Okay, but figure out how you can do that, because it will not be magic if you push yourself to the tilt and decide you're going to do everything and then 4 new things, and then you're in a pile of tears. So you've not failed your children if you have to buy a pumpkin pie. You have not, whatever it is, like, and I'm asking you to sort of but it's also okay. I'm asking you to sort of be clear-minded when I know you can't be. But also, it's okay to simplify, to scale back, to do what you can, and your children will still find it magical.
Yes.
But overworking, over-expecting is not going to make it magical for anybody. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to do things. Like, if you feel like, hey, I can do this and this is important in my healing and feeling normal, then do it. But if you can sort of do things that are low risk, like, this may not be the year to be like, and I'm going to be in charge of the entire PTO Thanksgiving feast for 6,000 children. Like, this may not be the year, because if you have a breakdown that moment, that morning, the children will not get their turkey, and then it's really dramatic, right? But like, if I'm going to make a small dinner, or we're going to have a small snack time, I want to have this moment of happiness after or on Christmas Eve. Things that have good backup plans. And if you fail, your husband can execute. You know, I think plan for some margin.
Yes.
This year. And I think that that's a good way to make sure there's some space.
Yes.
To not be surprised.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
I think, that plan for margin. So, well, we hope you all have a peaceful, restful, healing Christmas this year. It can be painful. We know that, and we see you, and we've been there. And it's our hope for you that you can enter this season in a time of rest. So thank you for listening today. We will talk to you after the holidays. Thank you for listening to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
To learn more about how we and you can support women suffering early pregnancy loss, visit our website at miscarriagecare.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you for listening.